Tomorrow, the long-awaited Michael Jordan 10-part miniseries comes out entitled The Last Dance. And it's important for us to remember that he was not the number one pick in the draft. This is episode 12 of the Royal City Hoops podcast. I am Bill. We're going to examine how to value or not overvalue and not undervalue lottery picks in the NBA draft. And we're going to use the 2017 NBA draft as the perfect example of how to properly gauge teams' effective drafting. First, let's recap. Number one, teams are drafting in the lottery for a reason. That's because they sucked the year before. And if you look at the NBA lottery, a lot of the same teams are in there. So, could be that they suck pretty bad. And that's an organization problem, not a coach or player problem. Number two, let's remember that 90% of NBA players are role models. Or not role models, sorry, role players. I should hope they try to be role models, but that's not required. Makes me think of the old Charles Barkley commercial. Next, players develop on different timelines. We talked about that one episode, or part 2 of this series with Steve Nash. He took a little bit longer. The other thing to remember is, as Jalen Rose said, it's almost as important as who drafts you as where you're drafted, because you're going to develop differently and teams are going to develop. Let's go back to our first reminder. Teams are drafting in the lottery for a reason. They are not good at developing basketball teams. So you may have players who go to a situation that isn't best for them. Now, let's look at it through the 2017 NBA draft. Number one pick was Markelle Fultz to the Philadelphia 76ers. But we need to go to a little bit of backstory on that. Now, the Boston Celtics actually had the number one pick from a trade they made in a previous season with the Brooklyn Nets. And trader Danny Ainge strikes again. He managed to trade the number one pick for the number 3 pick, get another asset from the Sixers, pick the player he wanted, and come out ahead. So winning the lottery, if you win the number one pick, that does not mean you won the lottery. It means you have the chance to pick the player you want. But what if the player you want isn't the quote-unquote best player in the draft? You're trying to make your team better. You're trying to find value. In football, they do this a lot. In football, they do not value first-round picks as much as they do a collection of picks to build your team. And Danny Ainge did something that New England Patriots do a ton of. He traded back in the draft, got another pick, got the player he wanted, and made his team better by collecting assets. Let's remember, players are assets, and those assets help your team. And draft picks are just players, or draft picks are just assets that have not become players yet. They're TBD. So the more of them you have, the better you're going to be. Chicago Bulls did this years before, and it took them a while to get over the hump. But let's stay on course here with the 2017 draft. Now, top 3 picks, Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Jason Tatum. Stellar picks. De'Aaron Fox was number 5. In that, who else did we have? Well, the interesting thing is later in the lottery, and this is the point I'm going to get to. Later in the lottery, Bam Adebayo and Donovan Mitchell are picked. So, let's think about your team's development and where you're drafting and who you're going to get. Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball, they're nice players. Are they that much better than Bam Adebayo and Donovan Mitchell? No. I mean, the jury's still out on Fultz, or it may be in, but it's just come to a verdict that he's not necessarily a bust, but should he have been the number one pick? At the time, a lot of people would have picked him there. Then he got the yips, and that was over with. So there was a lot of value. Lauri Markkanen, I think, was in the 7th pick in that draft. Zach Collins was in the lottery there. So you have some really useful players that ended up having an impact on their teams. Now, that doesn't mean all those picks are winners. Just because your team has a lottery pick or a top 5 pick or a top 2 pick doesn't mean everything's going to turn out great and they're going to win the draft. Frank Ntilikina, He was the 8th pick by the Knicks. Yes, it was the Knicks. But still, that's a high pick. People tend to value those. But again, we talked in previous episodes. You can find MVPs outside of the lottery. You can find all-stars outside of the first round. So it's important to just understand that these are assets. You are drafting an asset. And if your organization is not good at running itself, those assets are often wasted. We have Dennis Smith to Dallas. Now, you're not always going to hit home runs. Dallas is a good organization. Dennis Smith Jr. just didn't develop. It's a crapshoot. It isn't a science. It doesn't say this guy's going to be good, and he is good. How many number 1 picks didn't work out? Kwame Brown, Anthony Bennett, on and on and on. Andrew Bogut was the number 1 pick and was a super good NBA player, useful, had a long career. He was never an all-star, and he was never elite. But that doesn't mean he didn't have value. So we could say that maybe having the number 1 pick might be more of a detriment than helping your team if you need to develop. You're not always going to get LeBron James or Kyrie Irving. You might end up with Andrew Wiggins, who, again, useful NBA player, going to have a long career, not going to the Hall of Fame anytime soon. So let's look at some of the other players in that draft. You got Malik Monk was number 11. You've got Dennis Smith at 9, Neil Aquina at 8. Jonathan Isaac is a player I like. I think he's going to be very dynamic. He's not going to be a superstar, but defensively he can do a lot. He's got a developing feel for the game, and his outside shot is coming. And the way the game is played right now, Jonathan Isaac is somebody that I look to take on a bigger role in Orlando. I have a feeling Aaron Gordon's going to be on the move there. He's kind of played it. I don't think he can go any further in that organization. Sometimes you just need to change the scenery, and for him it really feels like that organization, it's run its course with him. De'Aaron Fox at number 5. Josh Jackson at number 4. He was in the G League, for a little while. And he's back with Memphis, I believe. So, Donovan Mitchell at 13. Bam Adebayo at 14. Luke Kennard at 12. So really, between 1 and 14, is there that big of a gap? Utah Jazz has done a great job of developing Donovan Mitchell. Mind you, he is super talented and he's developed on his own to a degree. Bam Adebayo is one of those players that I remember watching him 2 years ago in Summer League and thinking, he's got the total floor game. He reminded me a lot of Draymond, more athletic, more rangy. Maybe not quite the skill set that Draymond had as a playmaker, but you could see it coming. He could pull a rebound down. He could start the break. He saw the game. And this year, he finally got his opportunity. Hassan Whiteside out of the way, all that drama gone. Nobody else to take those minutes. They were his, and he's really done an incredible job with them, and he's going to be a real player to come. I think he'll be an all-star eventually, not too far away. And if he starts to develop a 15, 18-foot jump shot, the Miami Heat have really done a spectacular job. I mean, the Heat do a good job of drafting. They picked up a kid, Tyler Hero, this year, who I think is going to be a killer. So again, saw him in Summer League. You could just see he knows how to play. He's got a great skill set, confidence off the chart, and can shoot the air right. Like he can shoot the lights out, just all the time, and loves the big moment. Not afraid of it, wants it, isn't afraid to fail and get into it again. So Miami Heat, another great organization. They develop players. They got Duncan Robinson as well. Just they know what they're doing. So outside of those top 3 players, who knew where these other guys were going to go? And now we have Jason Tatum. Then you have Donovan Mitchell and Bam Adebayo at the back of the draft. Luke Kennard, jury's still out. Again, teams draft high in the lottery for a reason. Detroit, not a good organization. Ryan Russillo and Bill Simmons did a podcast on The Ringer about the 5 worst NBA GM openings, or jobs, as it were. And Minnesota was pretty high, and Detroit was pretty high too. Cleveland Cleveland, those are bad teams. And those teams are always drafting high. And there's a reason for that. Now, again, later in the draft, this draft is pretty stacked with players. Good role players, going to be around a long time. Jared Allen's in there. TJ Leaf, well, we'll see if he's getting minutes in Indiana. But John Collins, 19. That's a pretty sweet pick. He's a potential all-star. So let's, from now on, with the NBA draft, who knows when that's going to be. And we've talked about building a team. We talked about second-round picks, first-round picks. And something happened really interesting this week that I'll probably do another podcast about was Jalen Green. Or why don't we just talk about that? Jalen Green bypassing college, who's the #1 high school prospect for next season. Bypassing college and joining the G League team. Now, this is something that's going to shape basketball. It is not new. Him going to the G League for that big $500,000 contract and bypassing college. But again, Brandon Jennings was the first to do it. Jeremy something or other did it. After that, Emmanuel Mudiay, LaMelo Ball, R.J. Hampton did it this year to great success. I think LaMelo Ball's very sharp family. They bought the team, the Illawarra Hawks, that he's on. And I think they saw what was happening with that league in the NBA. And his dad had that failed high school league for players wanting to bypass college. And they can become a destination for some of these high school kids. Again, if you listen to what's been said about it, there's not going to be a ton of kids who can leave for this G League opportunity. There may be 5, 6 a year that can leave for it. So it's not going to be league-wide. Like, it's not going to be a pandemic, as it were, to over-exaggerate what it might be. It's also not going to sink the NCAA. I think a lot of European programs are going to mimic what Australia's done with their prospects positions. And they're going to be able to recruit young American players, a little bit of branding. All these kids now are on Instagram. They're their own brands coming in. I think it's going to be very difficult for fans to get a good gauge on who's good because the YouTube and Instagram and all that stuff, you're going to see all these highlights. You're going to be in love with these guys, but you're not going to know how good they are because those are edited together. You're not going to see a lot of gameplay. It's spotty competition. And as part of our conversation, you just have to realize just because these kids don't become Hall of Famers or All-Stars doesn't mean they're failures. Their goal is to be professional basketball players. Getting drafted, playing in the NBA, that's success. And us as fans, we tend to say, oh, he was the #1 pick. That doesn't mean they're going to be Hall of Famers. And we have to really look at this from a different light as fans of teams and fans of players and seeing the changing landscape of professional basketball. I mean, I think we talked about it earlier. Basketball is being consumed. The NBA is being consumed more from a streaming mobile perspective, more and more generationally, than it is from cable and TV and all that. So we're seeing a real shift in how the game is consumed. That we see the impact of Instagram and YouTube and all of that on fans. We as basketball lovers have to evolve and be a little more nuanced in how we look at teams being built in the NBA draft. And judging accurately a player's worth as his career develops, because where they're drafted, the team, Sacramento, I mean, they haven't been to the playoffs in a decade, maybe longer. You know, you can have a player you really like and they get drafted there and they don't work out. And then they go to another team and they do. They got Marvin Bagley. He's been injured. Who knows how he's going to turn out. So it's very important for us as fans to understand that not everybody's going to be a home run. It isn't a science. Where you're picked in the draft has nothing to do where your career ends. So that's it for today. I'm going to end with a question. Who is somebody in the NBA draft that you thought was going to work out, that was going to be a stud, a star, and didn't? That's all I got for today. So like if you like, comment if you have something to say, subscribe at your own risk, and we'll see you on the next one.